Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here for today's update. I'll have more to say in a few minutes. But before that, I want to turn it over to Commissioner Morrison for a situational update. Commissioner Morrison.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety. This morning, the state of Vermont is in much better shape than we were at this time yesterday. That being said, we are still in active response mode and have multiple rescues ongoing. The hardest hit area currently is Lamoille County, where we rescued 32 people and numerous animals overnight. This brings the total number of rescues since Sunday to over 200, and we have facilitated over 100 evacuations. As I said, today we have numerous water rescues underway in Lamoille County, and we are compiling reports of damaged or destroyed critical infrastructure. Throughout the day, we will continue to have swift water and urban search and rescue teams staged across the state to address local requests for assistance related to life safety concerns. Generally speaking, rivers have crested and river flooding should wind down throughout the day. The southern and central parts of the state have seen floodwaters recede and the sun come out. These areas are quickly turning the corner to the recovery phase of this disaster. For now, things are stable in many areas across the state. I will continue to remind Vermonters that further precipitation is forecasted for Thursday and Friday that could bring significant additional rainfall. We have to continue to be vigilant and mindful that more flooding is a very real possibility. Currently, flooding concerns persist at the following locations: the Winooski River at Essex, the Lamoille River at Jeffersonville, the Missisquoi River at East Berkshire, the Otter Creek at Center Rutland, and the Arrowhead Dam in Milton. All rivers are expected to be below flood stage within the next 24 hours. Regardless of river levels, our waterways are not safe right now. The currents are fast, there is a tremendous amount of debris, and folks really need to stay off our rivers for the time being. I'm relieved to say that as of 8 o'clock this morning, no fatalities have been reported. This is undoubtedly due to two things: Vermonters' common sense and resilience, and the incredible dedication, professionalism, and hard work of our first responder community. I have deep appreciation and respect for all of our local, county, and state first responders. Thank you for your life-saving work during this disaster. We need to remain vigilant in the days to come, as many disaster-related deaths occur after the acute phase and during cleanup and recovery. Vermonters, keep your guard up and do not take chances. Numerous communities are under boil water notices. A list of impacted water districts can be found on the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources website at anr.vermont.gov/flood. I'm happy to report that statewide we are below 1,000 power outages thanks to the hard work and commitment of our public utility partners. Those returning to their flooded homes should take precautions when entering. Do not turn on your circuit breaker or use any power sources until you have had your system checked by a licensed electrician. For those with damaged property, please report your damages to 211 as we are collecting data for a possible federal disaster declaration. We need your information in order to paint an accurate picture of the extent of damage across the state. Homeowners should also contact their insurance company. If you are displaced from your home and need shelter, please call 211. There are numerous local and Red Cross shelters operating, as well as 3 state-run shelter locations. Lastly, the state has established a website for those wishing to volunteer in storm relief, vermont.gov/volunteer. People who wish to help are asked to register and not self-deploy. We are not asking for donations of items at this time. If you want to help, make a monetary donation to an established recovery organization, such as the Northern New England Red Cross or your local United Way. And I will turn things now back to Governor Scott.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're grateful to be joined by FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. She and her team have been working around the clock to support Vermont's response to this catastrophic flooding. As well, I want to express my appreciation to Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, and Congresswoman Pallant for their outreach. I spoke with each of them over the last 48 hours, and as you can see, they're here, and they've made it clear they will work in Congress to help Vermont move forward. I also appreciate the number of messages I've received from fellow governors on both sides of the aisle, offering support and immediate help, and in a few cases, we've taken them up on that. President Biden also called to express his concern for what we're going through. He offered his full support and that of his team. And that's why Administrator Criswell is here today. This isn't a dog and pony show. We have work to do this afternoon. She's here on behalf of President Biden. And after this press conference, we'll be surveying damage as part of her and her team's work to assess how they can best help Vermonters. As I discussed yesterday, the flooding we've seen is historic. And as waters begin to recede, at least for the time being, we'll be surveying the damage done to infrastructure, homes, and businesses. And again, this may not be over. With rain in the forecast and nowhere for it to go, we could see waters rise again. So it's critical for Vermonters be aware of their surroundings, remain vigilant, and plan ahead. Although we're still in our immediate response phase and not quite at a point where we're focused on recovery, later today I'll be signing an executive order so we can expedite rebuilding through temporary regulatory relief, which will be critical for emergency response and infrastructure repairs. We'll have more information on that in the next 24 hours. Next, later today, Administrator Criswell, our congressional delegation, and I will visit some impacted sites surveying damage. I'll also be traveling later this week to many heavily impacted communities across the state. Before I turn it over to the Administrator, I want to once again thank all those working on the response and the thousands of Vermonters who are stepping up to help us get us through this crisis. I continue to be inspired by their resilience and humanity so many have shown us, from our first responders and rescue crews to neighbors checking on neighbors. I know we'll get through this by working together. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Administrator and once again thank her and her team for their tireless work.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, everybody. Governor, just thank you so much for inviting me to join you today on this assessment, and your praise for the team that's been here working really hard. I just wanted to start out by saying, on behalf of the President and in the entire federal family, our thoughts are with everyone across Vermont right now as they are experiencing the impacts of this truly historic and catastrophic flooding event. Our hearts are with everybody that's going through this, and I know many people are remembering what it was like in Irene. And the biggest thing, and you've heard this already, is making sure that as the continued weather changes, that Vermonters are taking all of the steps to understand what their risks are and that they're trying to stay safe. As you heard from the Governor, FEMA and the entire Biden-Harris administration, we're here ready to support. We had teams on the ground prior to the declaration so we could be ready to respond immediately. That includes our incident management teams to help with the overall federal coordination, as well as our search and rescue teams. And we will continue to send additional resources as we work with the Governor and his team to understand what the needs are as we go into the recovery phase, but even to continue to support the ongoing response. And thanks to the swift approval of the governor's request for disaster declaration by President Biden, that gives us the ability to mobilize the entire federal. And as you heard from the governor, today is about understanding what those impacts are, understanding what the total extent of damage is across Vermont, so we can make sure that we are turning on the right programs and bringing the right resources in here to support the ongoing recovery efforts. As we work with the governor's office to better understand the overall extent and the impact of this, I think you've already heard this from the governor and you've heard this from the commissioner, but it's worth repeating. Very important that Vermonters stay vigilant. Stay vigilant, stay alert, stay aware to your surroundings. I know that we are expecting more rain, and so you need to make sure that you are not putting yourself in harm's way, that you're not moving into walking through or driving through water, especially moving water. We know that it takes just 6 inches of water for somebody to be wiped off of their feet. And in that water, we see a lot of debris. We see down power lines. We see things that can cause additional damage. And so I really encourage everybody, please, do not walk, do not swim, or do not drive through these waters. Even as they're starting to recede, be very cognizant of what the future rain is going to bring over the next couple of days. As you're starting your cleanup process and your recovery process, one thing that I really want to emphasize to everybody here is you do not need to wait to be able to see if FEMA is going to come do an inspection. Take pictures, document your damage, gather your important papers, contact your insurance company, have all of that information available, but you do not need to wait to start the cleanup process. The faster you can get that moved out and the debris moved out of your home, the easier it's going to be for the recovery time. And so as you continue to do this, and as we continue to see what the extent of the damages are, I just want everybody here to know that FEMA is going to be here to support Vermont, to support the governor and all of your needs. As you transition from response and into the recovery phase, we will be here with you. So with that, I would just say stay safe, stay strong, and with that, I will turn it over to Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much, Administrator, Commissioner, thank you. Governor, thank you and your team for the hard work that they are doing. There's not much that I can add to what has already been said. I think we all understand we are now living through the worst natural disaster to impact the state of Vermont since 1927, where dozens of people died at that time, and thank God at this point we have not seen any fatalities, and we all hope that will be the case. What we are looking at now are thousands of homes and businesses which have been damaged, sometimes severely. We're looking at roads and bridges, some of which have been wiped out and will need basic and fundamental repairs. And I want to echo what everyone else has said here. Right now, as we speak, you have road crews and emergency teams who are working 24/7 to save lives and save property. They are incredible heroes and heroines, and we all thank them very much for what they are doing. What the delegation, Senator Welch and Congresswoman Ballant and I are working very hard on is to make sure that all of the relevant federal resources are brought into the state as quickly as possible. And I spoke to the president yesterday he was in Europe, and he has pledged to do everything that he and his team can do. And that's why Administrator Criswell is here today assessing the damage. We will be working not only with FEMA, which will play a prominent role in our recovery, will play a prominent role in the cleanup efforts, the mitigation efforts. We'll be working with the Department of Transportation, the Department of Agriculture, and other federal agencies. I also want to make clear that our delegation, and we talked about that a moment ago, will do its best to make sure that the private insurance companies respond quickly and effectively to the needs of the people of Vermont. I'm going to work with them to make sure that they are not nickel and diming people, but are responding to the real damage that people are seeing. So with that, let me thank the administrator for being here and the great work that she and her team are doing. And I am confident that when we stand together, we are going to do the best that we can to get out of this catastrophe. Thank you. And now let me introduce Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. Governor Scott, thank you so much for just an incredible response on your part, but also on the part of your entire team. It's really inspiring to see everyday Vermonters showing up for work and whatever it takes to be done to help Vermonters be safe and to recover. You do it. And it's all about cooperation, and it's all about not complaining. It's all about facing the day before you. And every Vermonter whose home has been affected has just got a long, very tough road ahead. I remember, as many of you do, folks going back to their homes after Irene, and there'd be a couple of feet of mud in the basement. Neighbors would be showing up, helping to dig it out. But it's tough, it's long, and the recovery begins today. So all of us are just inspired by the work of the first responders, the emergency management professionals, National Guard, the medical folks, everyone. I also want to thank the reporters. You know, this is a time when local news is what people absolutely need desperately. And the news that has been provided by our press corps has been, I think, a real security for Vermonters to know what's going on. So thank you for that. You know, all of us have a job to do. Those of us in the delegation led by Senator Sanders and with me and Congresswoman Ballin. There's a couple of things that we have to do, and we'll just be coordinating with the governor's office. One is FEMA is dealing with an unprecedented number of national disasters. They're going to need a plus up in their funding. We're going to do every single thing we can to make sure that FEMA has the funds to do everything that Vermonters are entitled to. And we've received, Bernie and I on the Senate floor, assurances and offers of help, including from Republicans. This is a real emergency. It's not the use of the name to try to leverage spending on something else. This is an emergency. So our job will be to make certain that the funds are there so that FEMA can do everything on behalf of Vermonters that Vermonters need and are entitled to. Second, there's a lot of hassles that folks face with paperwork, and as much as everyone tries to make that as simple as possible, it can be difficult. Bernie and Becca and I are going to coordinate our casework teams so that we can try to provide the best and quickest and most efficient response to Vermonters. So we'll be out there, in addition to what Senator Sanders said about keeping an eye on and doing all we can to encourage insurance companies to be fair and to be quick. So this is going to be an ongoing process, and we will be all in to back up the very hard on-the-ground work. Ultimately, it's about that business. It's about that Vermont family that wants to get back in action, have their feet on the ground, and be able to move ahead. And we will do our part. And I'm quite proud to be here with Vermonters who are working so hard and so effectively to respond to the needs of our citizens. Thank you. And now, Congresswoman Ballin. Hi, Becca. Thank you.
Thank you. So my message to Vermonters is really simple. It's that this kind of event brings up a tremendous amount of trauma for communities and for individuals. I know from speaking with people across the state in the last few days, they're still reeling from the pandemic, and this emergency has brought up memories of what happened during Tropical Storm Irene. We cannot overstate the impact that trauma can have on the lives, particularly of children and adolescents. So, as the governor said, you know, we have seen Vermonters stepping up to help out each other. I know that's going to continue to happen. You can sign up to volunteer on Vermont.gov. Please do that. Don't self-deploy, as the governor said. Please be part of a coordinated event in terms of helping your neighbors. But on the day-to-day, what I'm asking Vermonters to do is be gentle with one another. This is a difficult time for so many, for families, for individuals, for small businesses, and also for farmers. As we were driving down from the airport, saw lots of cropland that has been destroyed. As we know, even on a good day, farming in Vermont, it's tough to make ends meet. So please be gentle with your neighbors. Let them know that you're there for them, and we are going to be there for you. Our teams will be coordinating. We'll stay in close contact with Administrator Criswell and with the governor, and we are strong. We're going to get through it together. Thank you. And the governor again. My apologies.
Thank you, Becca. We'll now open it up to questions.
You mentioned farmlands being flooded. Would that be something covered under the emergency declaration that's already been approved by the president, or do you need a separate USDA disaster?
I believe there's some separation there, but I might.
Right, the agricultural piece is not part of what the Stafford Act covers. That would be work that we can help coordinate with the Department of Agriculture to make sure we get the right federal representatives in here to better understand what the impacts are.
And Administrator, Senator Welch mentioned an unprecedented number of natural disasters. Can you talk about the role of climate change in all of this and how FEMA is responding to this?
Yeah, what I can say is that in my 2+ years so far in this role is that I have seen an increase in records being broken, right? Records that have stood for decades or even a century, and it's happening over and over again. And so climate change is a factor, I think, in what we are seeing as a result of this increase in the amount of rain that's coming in, not just an event like this, but even in our hurricanes. And we have to start to think about what is this going to look like in 10 years from now so we can understand what those risks are going to be, because I think what we're facing today is not what we faced 10 years ago. And so in order to help reduce the impacts of that, we really need to start to better understand what it's going to look like 10 and 20 years from now so we can use our mitigation dollars to help reduce those impacts and help these communities be more resilient.
Are the rescues still happening? You mentioned Lamoille County, so those are actively happening, and where in Lamoille County is that happening?
The most recent information I have is that they're in Jeffersonville, but that there are threats and potential calls for our swiftwater rescue assets in other places in Lamoille County.
How do you explain that the swiftwater rescues are still happening on a regular basis when the rivers have crested and are starting to go down? Is that just a consequence of the storm moving north, and so the worst impacts are still in the north area presently?
I can't answer that. I don't know if the governor can.
Well, again, I mean, water flows downhill, right? So we've seen it here. It's starting to, it crested and is lowering in the Montpelier area, but that means the water is heading somewhere else, and that's to Chittenden County. And so we're seeing the elevation there. We're seeing it in communities like Jeffersonville and Johnson as well.
With the forecast being what it is, situations like the Wrightsville Dam, what are the levels of concern there? And
yeah.
How's that holding up?
Yeah, we've been concerned about that since last Sunday, and so we've been monitoring the level. As you know, it got up to about 1 foot below where we'd have to open up the gates, but we were able to get through that moment. So we're monitoring it at this point, and that's one of my biggest concerns is what about Thursday and Friday, and if we'll just have to see what it brings us. But we're monitoring the situation and trying to make sure that we allow for some capacity as we can to lower, create more reservoir capacity at Wrightsville in particular, but all the other dams as well. So it's not just there, we're looking across the state.
From what you know now, what are you anticipating on Thursday and Friday?
We don't know. I mean, what the Weather Service is telling us in our SEOC brief this morning, they were thinking maybe 1 to 2 inches Thursday and Friday. But as we've seen over the last year, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, they can try and predict to their best ability, but I wouldn't say that we knew that we were going to get 7 to 9 inches in this past storm. So we'll see what happens Thursday and Friday, but we're monitoring the situation.
I was going to say, what is the state's preparation for the next 4 years?
Well, again, we want to preserve what we have, trying to alleviate some of the structures in terms of the damage done in front of their culverts and box culverts and so forth, so that we can allow water to go through them, because that's where a lot of the damage has been, clogging up the inlets. As well, trying to make sure that we have the capacity in those reservoirs, so that we can allow for more capacity.
I know Barry and Montpelier are under boil water notices. Are you aware of any other towns that are, and are there any plans to deploy water trucks?
Yeah, I would say that most communities might be under that boil water notice, but Commissioner Morrison.
Yes, there are multiple communities. I don't know the exact number, but there's a real-time list of the impacted water districts. So remember, it's not by town; it's by the water district where you get your water service from. And that website can be found at www.anr for Agency of Natural Resources.vermont.gov/flood.
The governor and members of the delegation and administrator have to exit out this door right now. If everyone could stay put as they do so, the rest of the team and the representatives from FEMA will be able to stay and answer additional questions.
You're staying.
Oh, you're staying. I'm staying with you. No, I think you're going. I don't know. Okay. I don't know if the commercial oh, okay, maybe not. Oh, sorry, right. That was the governor. Okay. Are you going to continue to facilitate?
Yeah,
very good.
Feel free to.
One of the questions I have is, so the FEMA money, the federal money we're getting, is this a loan? Is this a grant? Is it both? What's the rough breakdown of this?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Lori Ehrlich. I'm the regional administrator for New England for FEMA, and I think that there are today's a day for assessment where we're going to be determining the extent of the damage, and then what will follow after will be depending on that. That assessment will be what the funding will be. So it's hard to characterize it at this point, but after the assessment, we will certainly know more. And I know that the governor is working on a major disaster declaration.
Senator Welch, I think this is best suited for you. Do you foresee the farm bill as playing any role in perhaps delivering funds to Vermont to respond to this?
I don't see that. I see the current structures we have through FEMA, and we're going to need, I think, a supplemental, and we've been talking about that. And if there's some specific things that come up, the delegation will do everything we can. I do want to just respond a little bit to the climate change question. I talked to the head of NOAA yesterday and asked him that question, and as it has been reported, the warmer weather, particularly over the ocean, that then comes across the country and is here in Vermont, means that there's much, much more moisture in the air. So a rainstorm pre-climate change would not have dumped in some places 9 inches of rain, but all of that moisture in the air gets turned into rain that then gets added to the volume, which is enormous. So that is very much a climate change related situation. And then of course with our ridge lines, it just created a weather dynamic where it lingered longer. And with the combination of the lingering and the excess moisture that is climate change related, we had this vast volume of rain that pre-climate change we wouldn't have had. It would have just been a storm.
Question for Commissioner Morrison, might be also directed to the governor, who's obviously not here, but was the state government lacking the response in the early stages. The emergency command center closed Monday night when the storm was.
We did not close. We did not close. That is incorrect information.
So when Channel
We
3
went virtual. We had to evacuate the EOC in Waterbury. We never shut down the Emergency Operations Center, and every position was filled and leaning in virtually until we could re-aggregate ourselves here at this building. So that is incorrect information that we chose not to call out when it was originally published, but let me now call it out and make it very clear. We have activated our EOC since Sunday afternoon, and it has been in continuous operation, and as the disaster the scope of it became clear, we have bolted on more and more partners. So we never closed the EOC.
Do you think that hindered our operations? From
Not at all.
Emergency management did not know 89 was closed till Channel 3 up and down.
That is not true either. As you listen, you guys are the professionals in this. You know that misinformation is as big an issue as information and the information you share. That is also untrue. I don't know what your source is, but it is untrue. We have chosen to focus on the important pieces of this disaster, which is an outstanding, well-oiled and well-practiced response. And both of the things you've just said are untrue, and we can unpackage that at another time.
In regards to the dam and managing capacity of the reservoir, what does that look like in terms of, is it releasing some water, or how do you manage that?
I don't think I have any. Do you want to speak to that, Eric?
Yeah, are you talking about a
This is
specific dam?
This is Eric Forend, who's the interim director of Vermont Emergency Management. We don't have a representative of the Department of Environmental Conservation here right now, but he will maybe be able to give you some high-level information.
I understand the governor was concerned about the Wrightsville Dam in particular.
Yeah, the Wrightsville Dam is the ones the governor has been speaking about. We've had eyes on it and since Sunday night. But what is happening is they get to a certain procedural step. The water's high enough, it has to go through the overflow. Again, there was some misinformation about its failure, or imminent failure, not accurate. It's acting in the way that it's supposed to act, which gives us time to understand what the downstream effects are going to be. So if we know that it's going to release a certain amount of water, a certain amount of cubic feet, we know how far it's going to go. We know how far we need to activate folks or evacuate folks. We could send teams to do that. We did that the other day. That dam specifically is now set down to about a foot under, and it's sat there and it's stabilized. So we have different teams at different dams because in Vermont, one agency doesn't own all dams, so it's a concerted effort among a bunch of agencies and a bunch of different individuals. So we have those individuals here, and we are watching them.
The governor seemed to be suggesting, though, that you were going to be lowering the level of the dams in order to create capacity. Did I misunderstand that?
My name is Maggie Gender, and I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Natural Resources, which oversees Department of Environmental Conservation, Forest Parks and Rec, and Fish and Wildlife. So our attention was really focused on the 3 flood control dams in Waterbury, Middlesex, which is Wrightsville, and Eastbury. Wrightsville is at reduced risk. We are going to continue to monitor it, as everybody has said, given that we're watching the weather events. We just have to be vigilant. Our lead dam safety expert was sleeping at the Waterbury Dam Reservoir to release the dam floodgates and close and open them as necessary to keep communities safe. So when it comes to the Wrightsville Dam in particular, we're at reduced risk. We have been very fortunate that our facilities here in Vermont have withstood this pressure. It doesn't mean that we're not concerned as we move forward with more precipitation coming. So our dam safety program has been working with the Army Corps of Engineers to do an analysis, exactly like Eric just said, to understand that if more precipitation comes and we're monitoring these levels, what does it look like for downstream, so that we as dam owners can give the best data and information to emergency management so they know how to mobilize communities and keep everybody safe. So in terms of your question, we're not there yet, but the purpose of the way that the dam is set up is to withstand flood. And so it has its own mechanisms in place built into the structure to do that. So we call it the spillway. It's pretty much an overflow system. So that's where we're at right now. So we just want to make sure, because there was a lot, again, misinformation about Wrightsville. We're at reduced risk. we're watching it, we're monitoring it closely, and our team takes very seriously the responsibility to give information to Vermonters as we get it.
It would seem that if the dam is only a foot above the spillway and there's storms coming that you've already discussed, that there would be the need, or maybe it makes sense to do some limited release to create capacity behind the dam. Is that not?
So the management of dams is a really technical profession, and I'm happy to get you the answer to that question. I don't have it. I would be more comfortable having our dam engineers give you the information to that. So I'm happy to give you my information.
Did you want to speak to the fact that that's only the 3 dams that the state owns, and there are
So-
hundreds of other dams?
So the Agency of Natural Resources owns 100 dams in the state of Vermont, and we regulate about 800 privately owned and municipally owned dams. So this is a very active space for us right now.
Commissioner Morrison, I think this is a question for you. What about healthcare infrastructure? Are hospitals accessible? Are they staffed? How is that looking right now?
To my knowledge, they are all accessible. They are all staffed. During the course of the last 72 hours, I believe we had 1 personnel-related request to help facilitate bringing staff to a hotel where a lot of the roadways were closed. But to my knowledge, unless you shake your head no.
The only other situation is a water situation at Copley that we're rectifying. They're under a boil water notice. Copley.
Okay.
So we are reaching out for resources to that, and it may be to FEMA, but we're working on that now.
What about delivery routes and supply chain for essential goods? I'm thinking food, medication, gasoline, fuel. Have there been any interruptions that you're aware of with those deliveries to the state?
Joe, do you want to backstop him on this?
Sure. Yeah. On our side, from the emergency services and emergency management, no. We've had no issues.
And I would just add to that, you heard me yesterday say that our first priority is the national highway system. Our second priority are arterial routes that feed that. And I think I told you that our third priority are the critical routes that supply hospitals and other key resources. That's not to say we wouldn't take immediate intervention if a hospital had a need. But we at VTrans, and along with our partners, have been actively working since this thing began to keep those routes established. We do currently have some interruption on rail, but we will have a forecast of when that should all be restored as soon as possible.
And that's mostly fuel deliveries that come to the by rail.
There's multiple commodities, but it's primarily fuel. There is some lumber, there's some animal feed. Yeah, thank you.
Secretary Flynn, have you noticed an improvement due to the structural improvements from Irene?
Yes. We work closely with the Agency of Natural Resources, primarily the Department of Environmental Conservation, after Irene, to take a look at specifications for how we design bridges. In fact, immediately after Irene, back at the National Life Facility, where both ANR and VTrans at one time were on different floors, we embedded structural engineers with river engineers on the same floor in adjoining cubicles. No more silos just because we were separate agencies, so that we could best understand the sort of pressures that you've heard of, climate concerns, so that we could best understand the forecast for the pressures we would see in the future, that affect the hydrology and how we design structures. I think I may have mentioned yesterday, but an example would be a bridge that might have been built in the 60s when the highway system was established, was perhaps a bridge that had a pier in the center of the watercourse with abutments on each shoulder, on each bank. Today we're designing bridges differently so that they can span that watercourse without having to have a pier in the center. Now, that's not to say you won't find a bridge with a pier in it, and remind me of that, but that might be one that's been built a while. So we are looking to do things like that, to create a wider opening for debris and more water to pass through bridges, so that, like you saw in Irene, when we had 34 bridges that were either destroyed, or what primarily happened was the debris would come downstream and it would hit the pier in the middle, and it would go around the abutments, and it would take out the approaches of the road to the bridge. So the actual structure survived, but you couldn't get onto it. So there's been a lot of things like that that have been beneficial, lessons learned since Irene.
For the state volunteering program that you have talked about, do you have any kind of response or numbers on what that's garnered so far since it started? Is there a key number you guys are maybe trying to get to, and when those people are expect to be kind of the goal, if you will?
So as we mentioned, the volunteer website, we're advocating everyone to go sign up through that. As of yesterday morning, there had already been 300 folks that were signed up. We're also working with Serve Vermont, who has another 200 AmeriCorps that are getting staged and ready to assist.
I'm wondering if there's someone who can provide a little more insight into the ongoing rescues, whether this is a situation where people are isolated because of damage to their homes, to their roads, or if there are people who got stuck in their cars. I mean, have they been there this entire time? Any other details you can provide?
So I can't give you any details about what they're doing right this minute because my information is several hours old. I can tell you that last night, one of the rescues was someone who drove around a road that was meant to be closed and got into trouble, and they had to rescue somebody from a vehicle. There were 30 or so people and many animals rescued from residential structures in the Jeffersonville area, and I don't know if there was another one-off somewhere along the way. But as to what they're doing right this minute, I don't know. But if that's important to you, we can certainly get back to you on it.
And I'm wondering in the shelters, how many people are relying on that?
Do you recall the numbers?
I don't, but we do have census data that we can provide to you.
We have census data as of the activity last night, and we can get that to you if you're interested in that. We can get you the information for the state-run shelters, and we are in the process of collecting the information for the locally run and the Red Cross-run shelters.
So some of the homeless hotels have been flooded out. As far as you know, have those folks been able to relocate to some of the shelters, the state shelters?
I don't have that information. I think that would be an Agency of Human Services question.
Jen, you said something about urging people to stay off of the waterways of the state, and obviously I understand not going through areas that are flooded in cars and walk by. In Montpelier yesterday, there were all manner of people taking the kayaks and paddleboards and canoes, and these people, some of them have businesses they're trying to check on. I mean, are you urging people? Can you clarify what you're urging them not to do? You don't want them to be doing any of that?
No, it's not safe. I mean, it's do so at your own risk. There can be downed electrical lines. There can be oil, gasoline, other hazmat materials in that water that's flowed over the waterways. There can be street sign metal spikes that you could slip and fall on. I mean, there's all sorts of hazards in the water when you can't see to the bottom. So our recommendation is stay out of flooded areas and stay off the rivers until we get to a place where the currents have calmed down, the water's not so churned. Right now everything is brown, you cannot see, and the debris is been abated to some degree.
I have updated shelter numbers of folks. These are the active shelters. In case you guys governor's chief of staff. Berry Auditorium, 58. Cavendish School, 0. Hartford High School, 3. Ludlow Community Center, 8. Northern Vermont University Johnson Campus, 30. Rutland Senior High School, 4. Smuggler's Notch, 45. Woodstock EMS Building, 0.
I think this is a question for the Deputy Secretary. Has there been any sort of mitigation or cleanup efforts of any fuel or oil spills? I'm thinking particularly home heating tanks that have been
Sure. Yeah. So we have as Commissioner had mentioned, we have on our website, we have created a flood portion of that. And that's a space where we're going to educate Vermonters on what to do about drinking water, septic and wastewater, hazardous materials. And so we have one-pagers on instructing folks on what to do with that, and we'll be working with our partners, both contractors and other state and federal agencies to participate in that cleanup. Like I said, right now we're still in emergency management mode, and we're simultaneously transitioning to recovery. So we're starting to post all of that information. We'll be working with Front Porch Forum, Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns to get that information out rapidly to communities.
Is there any concern about flammability in those sorts of situations?
I have not heard of any concern to date.
Do you know what the rates of discharge from
wastewater facilities?
I don't, but we do have that information. I don't have it with me right now. I can get that for you.
Secretary Flynn, do you have an updated number of state road closures for today?
I do. So since I reported...
Before we have a 1 minute.
Okay. 46 roads remain closed, 7 roads remain partially open, 33 roads have opened since I last spoke to you yesterday. I can really quickly, we are still working to inspect 35 bridges around the state of Vermont. We currently only know of 2 bridges that we lost. Significant difference from Irene. As I mentioned, there is some damage to state-owned rail property, and that is continuing to be assessed today. Much of it has to be hiked on foot in some very remote areas, especially along the Green Mountain Railroad between Rutland and Bellows Falls. Both the Amtrak Ethan Allen and the Vermonter remain suspended at this time. The state-owned airports are okay. And AOT also owns 2 dams, which at this time are not providing any problem. Pardon me?
The bridges lost.
The floating bridge in Brookfield, and I'm going to forget the route number, so don't hold me to this, but it might be Route 132, but it's in Berkshire. We're still looking for the bridge, but we're not going to put it back. We just are curious where it went to.
And sorry, the second number you said, partially closed roads, what was that number?
7. So what that means is 1 lane, a restriction. Yeah. Open for traffic, but restricted.
Question for FEMA. I might be getting ahead of myself here, but are there any thoughts of redrawing or rethinking flood zone maps in the future?
So it's a great question, and it's certainly something that FEMA is working on nationally. I think we've discussed climate change here, but I think nobody doubts anymore whether or not we're having more storms, whether there's more flooding events, whether there's sea level rise. I mean, these things are not really open for debate anymore. So the implications on our flood maps are something that we have to account for. So, so I know this is a hot topic right now, but certainly something that's on FEMA's radar.
Would you mind just spelling out your name?
Sure. Yes. Sure. Lori, L-O-R-I. Last name is Ehrlich, E-H-R-L-I-C-H, 2 H's. And I'm the Regional Administrator, Region 1 for FEMA. And Region 1 is all 6 states of New England and 10 tribal nations.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everybody. For folks who are planning to